Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ciara and I'm the Digital Events Manager at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand are part of the Info Exchange Group, a not-for-profit social enterprise that tackles the biggest social challenges to the smart and creative use of technology. For those of you who haven't attended a webinar session with us before, Connecting Up and TechSoup facilitate an annual training calendar of online webinars, workshops, boot camps and webcons to help the social sector upskill in all things digital. You should check out our training and education menu on our website for more events coming up online. Enough about that. I'm excited to welcome you today to Gaining Buy-in, Strategies for IT Leadership to Influence Key Stakeholders in Organisational Products with Cassandra Hatton. Cassandra is a dynamic and accomplished leader in the non-for-profit sector with a career spanning over 15 years. She has a diverse leadership portfolio that encompasses human resources, strategy, service delivery, and technology. Cassandra's qualification in advanced HR and psychology form the cornerstone of her leadership philosophy, that people are the heart of any organization's success. Cassandra is renowned for her ability to drive transformative change and create tangible impact. A champion of exclusivity and safety, Cassandra was a finalist for the 2018 Australian Human Resources Institute Dave Ulrich HR Leader of the Year Award, highlighting her profound industry impact. Cassandra's commitment to cultivating positive organisation culture makes her a captivating speaker and an inspiring leader. Some housekeeping for everyone. All your lines are muted, so if any technical issues, please type it into the questions box on the webinar panel and I'll be able to assist you. If you have any questions throughout the session, please also type these in the questions box and Cassandra will answer them either during the session or when possible and at the end of the webinar. We really encourage you to ask as many questions as you think throughout the session to make this as dynamic and interactive as possible. No question is too silly, but also note your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. If you are on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar. And if possible, please close all other programs to help you have the best experience today. Note that the webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you as soon as we can after this webinar ends. Before we start, I'd also like to mention that there is a short survey at the end of the webinar, and if you could take the time to complete this, we really would appreciate it. Thanks for attending today, and I'll hand you over to Cassandra.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. So pleased to be with you on this sunny Wednesday morning. I don't know if it's sunny where you are. It's actually rainy where I am. I'm joining you from Sydney this morning. And I would love, one of the things at conferences that is so great is that we can eyeball each other and I can see your faces and I can see what's landing and I can see what isn't landing. And so you need to help me out on a webinar and just pop in the chat, just as you were just, Ciara just said, if just pop in the chat if you've got questions, pop in the chat if something's resonated with you. I'm going to ask you questions throughout the next 55 minutes that we have together, and I would love for you to join me in this discussion. I can't see you, so just be present to me in the chat. That would be incredible. Now, I was just told a bunch of the organisations that were joining this morning, and it's honestly just the biggest delight to get to share some of the lessons and wisdom that I have gained over a short period of time. And I hope that this is in service of you. So I know that that's my intention this morning, is to bring as much value as I can in the limited amount of time that we have together. And so
Cornered her at the conference.
Now I think your mic's still on the other end there.
Yes, got it.
Thank you. So thank you for joining. Thank you for jumping online. And I never miss a chance when I'm in a forum like this to say thank you for being in the not-for-profit space. So you are my people. I absolutely love this space. And I just want to say thank you for bringing your experience and your talent and your wisdom into this sector, because it's an incredibly important sector for our world and it needs talented and capable people. And I've got to say, I think there's an incorrect idea out there that it's a cruisy place to work in, right? Has anyone else, could you tell me in the chat if you've ever heard people say, I really want to go into the not-for-profit sector to just to finish out my career, or just to cruise a little bit, or just, have a nice time. It's a nice place to be. But you and I know that it's actually one of the most complicated, complex, difficult places to work, because there is always more need and aspiration than there is resource, and it needs incredibly creative and talented people to solve wicked world problems in this sector. So I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you to all of you for being in this space. So I would like to, before we kick off, as always, acknowledge that we are gathered on country this morning. And so actually I have lived and worked on Wurundjeri lands of the Kulin Nation in Victoria for the last 13 years. But today, as I said, I am joining you from Sydney. So I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal lands and peoples, and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging as part of the acknowledgement this morning. And if you'd like to join me in making this acknowledgement, you can just tell me where you're joining from today in the chat. I was told that we've actually got a few people joining from New Zealand this morning as well. So welcome to all of you. So technology, you are technology people. We're talking about implementing major digital transformation across our organizations. And we all know that technology has been transforming our world, and more so than ever before over the last just few years, actually. Not only in our organizations, and in fact, if you didn't already have major technology roadmaps on the agenda in your organization, there is no doubt that it is on your agenda today, or going to be very soon. It doesn't just affect our workplaces, it affects our home places as well. So I wonder, does anyone, I just want to do a quick poll, does anyone have an Apple Watch? You can pop in the, this is how have our lives changed with technology, even personally, over the last decade. Maybe you've got an Apple Watch. Maybe you have a Google Home or a Alexis, if you're an Android player in the room. Maybe you have a robot vacuum cleaner. Maybe you have a smart fridge. The world has changed significantly over the last 10 years, even at our homes. And the pandemic actually put the power of digital and technology on full display when we all went home to work in 2020. And in fact, they said that it was estimated that digital transformation was advanced by up to 7 years, just as a direct result of the impacts of the pandemic in year one. What people have also said is that despite that advancement happening, that acceleration happening up to 7 years in 1 year, 43% of organizations said they weren't ready for it. And now they're actually in catch-up mode. So with that having taken place, and just with the normal emergence of new technology that was already at play before the pandemic, there's a number of external forces pressuring our organizations to transform digitally, transform with technology. There's new heightened expectations from staff about the technology they would have at their fingertips when they join our organizations. There is new expectations from our external community about the transparency of how we're using funds and what type of technology we're investing in. There's a change in how clients want to access our services, and for some organizations that needs to be handled more carefully than others, because what we don't want to do is advance in a way that doesn't bring people along and increase that digital divide that has been talked about for a number of years already for disadvantaged communities. And on top of all of the normal technology advancement, we have seen just in the last 7 months the emergence of artificial intelligence, ChatGPT. Is anyone already implementing and embedding and using ChatGPT in your personal life and in your workplace? I am. It's a game changer in the best of ways, and also in a very scary way that I think is still unknown. With every new technology comes a new burden of responsibility. I heard someone say that very recently. I thought that's so true. And we're now going to be keeping up, or racing to keep up, with regulations and understanding what are the implications of implementing technology like this over the next couple of years. So with so much happening, the future of work and the world of work, our workplaces, the world, our home places are all looking very different. And there's new pressure for our teams to be implementing technology in a way that actually sticks and transforms our organizations. So what I want to ask you is, given that I've already mentioned the pandemic, is I just want you to stretch your mind back to a number of the trends that were taking place during that time. This is relevant, so stay with me. I hope that some of you remember the banana bread baking trend. Does anyone remember that? I'm going to need some interaction here. Tell me if you remember the banana bread baking trend. Now, I've done a lot of things, and I think I'm secure enough to say that I've got strengths in a number of areas, but one thing that I am not, one area that I do not have strengths is baking. I'm not a baker, I'm not very good in the kitchen. Don't judge me. I've got strengths in other areas. But when that trend took off, of course, like everybody else, I jumped into the kitchen and I wanted to fill my house with the fumes of banana bread. And I am a planner. I'm a detailed person, so I got the recipe out on my phone. I followed every step. I did everything I was meant to do. I mean, this sounds very straightforward to many of you, so please, once again, don't judge me. But when I pulled it out of the oven and I flipped the tin and I put it onto the plate, my banana bread was just this high. So I did everything so well, but I missed one ingredient. And all it took, after meticulous planning, after following all the steps and doing the very best I could with a smile on my face with great positive anticipation, all I did was miss one step and the banana bread came out like this. I hope someone else can resonate with me about this. The reason I'm telling that story is that you might not know this, but baking banana bread is very similar to implementing major technology projects across your organization. You can have the best plan, a great recipe. You can know all the steps required. You can follow them in meticulous detail, but if you miss one step, one important ingredient, it can come out flat. The whole thing can fall flat. And that one very important ingredient is actually gaining the buy-in from your key stakeholders. All it takes, you can be the best planned team, you can have the most talented people, you can be offering the greatest solution at the end of the project that's going to add loads and loads of value. But if you miss that one step, if you don't have that one ingredient in place, the whole thing can come out flat. So the things that I want to take you through today are the 5 lessons, 5 things that I think are crucial to gaining buy-in from your key stakeholders in your organization to make sure that your projects come out full perfectly as possible. So are you ready for that? So digital transformation is a people business. So the first thing I want to say to you is start with people, not technology. Start with people, not technology. Technology projects are actually less about technology than we think. Technology is just the vehicle, it's just the thing that we're putting in place. But actually what technology projects are about is people. It's about culture, it's about processes that people use, it's about behaviors that we're seeking to shift or embed across teams, across services, across program delivery toward our clients, towards our customers. So at St Vincent de Paul Society, I actually just finished up as the Chief Operating Officer at St Vincent de Paul Society, fantastic organisation. We actually changed our language to reflect this. So we had a team that was called our IT projects team. And what we did was we changed it from IT projects to our digital transformation team, because we wanted to reflect that we were not just talking about IT, we were actually talking about people, and we're talking about transformation. It's all about people, processes, culture. So we reflected that with a name change. And so I wonder, is there a reframe in your organization? Is there a way that you can start to shift the mindset and the approach toward technology projects that helps you to focus on the right thing? I've actually gotten technology projects wrong so many times. I have treated them like technology projects, and I have put projects in place, project plans in place, worked with teams to do an implementation process. and tacked on the people bit right at the end. I've tacked on a training program at the end, or I've tacked on a comms plan just in time before we got to implementation and people started using it mode. Has anyone else done that? Has anyone else treated IT projects like IT only and not actually put the people component in there? So here are some things that we started to do. It's very practical, but incredibly effective. So rather than start with technology plans, we started with people. So who are our stakeholders? Who are the people that are going to be impacted by this project at each stage of the project? So who needs to know before the project? Who needs to know at the discovery stage? Who needs to be involved at the deployment stage, et cetera, et cetera? Who are the stakeholders? What is their stake in this? So do we understand what the impact of this actually is for the people in our organization? Who are the stakeholders? What is their stake in this? And what engagement approach does each stakeholder need? So on the right-hand side of this slide is a really basic matrix that we have used. And essentially it's assessing each stakeholder's influence in the process and each stakeholder's impact. So in a spreadsheet, really practical here, we listed all of the stakeholders across our organization, and we had a column that measured their influence. How influential are these people at each stage of the decision-making process? And what is the impact on them at each stage? And then depending on where they landed in the matrix, we put in place a engagement approach for each stakeholder group. So that's a practical step that we started to use that really helped us, and I'm sure will help you. So starting right at the beginning of the project at truly understanding your stakeholders and the impact of the work that you're about to implement on all of your stakeholders, because technology projects are a people business. Oh, let me go back here. Something else is we used the change curve. Now, this is not our intellectual property. There's a lot of change frameworks that you can look up and use, and I encourage you not to overthink it. You don't need to have the most sophisticated thing. Just get a framework that will help guide you think through the right conversations to have, the right things to be thinking at each stage of the process. So on the change curve, where are your stakeholders and where do you want to get them at each stage of the project? So quite likely, many of your stakeholders will be at number one, contact at the very beginning of your project. And you can actually map out month by month, quarter by quarter, depending on how big your project is, where do you need to get each stakeholder group? Some stakeholder groups might only need to get to awareness. Some stakeholder groups might need to get all the way to the top of the change curve. So when you understand what each stage looks like, you can actually start to plan out the communications that you need to put in place, the engagement and interactions that you need to have with each stakeholder to move them from one stage to the next stage. So where on the change curve are your stakeholders? And if you do this step at the very, very beginning of your project, it will be your guide, it'll be your map all the way to the end that you can keep coming back and checking, where are my people at? Where are the stakeholders at? And depending on where each of them are on that first matrix, if they're priority, you want to be paying a lot of attention to them and making sure you're taking them through the change curve as effectively as possible. So first thing is start with people, not technology. So anytime you're about to kick off a technology project, don't go start talking to vendors, start with people. Who are your stakeholders? What's their stake in it? What approach do I need to take them with each stakeholder group? And where are they on the change curve now? And where do I want them to be? Secondly, is earn and keep earning trust. So this process starts long before a project starts. So as technology leaders or as leaders in our organization, whatever your role might be, one of our tasks every single day, every single week is trust building, it's relationship building. That needs to be a key priority of on all of our minds every single day. And I like to think about it as having credit in the bank so that when we actually go and start a project and we're wanting to influence, we're wanting to bring about behavioral change, process change, culture change, technology change, that we have already done the groundwork and we have that credit to draw on, that we're not starting from zero. I love the idea, perhaps you've heard of the concept speed of trust. I talk about this all the time. Low trust, low speed. High trust, high speed. It's a really simple concept and it applies to everything. If, you know, think about driving on dodgy roads. When you are not sure if you can trust the roads that you're on, old, rickety, crappy roads around dodgy corners, when you don't trust the roads, you're going slow, right? When you trust the infrastructure, when you trust the roads, when you trust, you can see that it's solid and that you're going high speed. So low trust, low speed, high trust, high speed. So relationally, from the very, you know, again, every day, every week, what are the steps we're taking to build relationships with the influencers and the decision makers and the people who might be impacted by the work we know is in our roadmap, even if it's a year away, 2 years away. This is the stuff that we have to start with. So trust building. There's this great book, Let's Talk Culture. And in this book, it talks about a lack of trust is the #1 culture killer. People shared that they identify a healthy culture by the trusting relationships that exist. And the truth is, like I just said, if there's not trust, the speed at which you can take your projects forward is going to be very slow. Now, I have a few examples of this. It wasn't that long ago, actually, that we had an incredible opportunity to implement a new piece of technology for a particular cohort in our organization. And we had a really talented team. And we had a meticulously detailed plan that we had developed, and we'd thought through every step. We'd even thought about the change process, the communications, we'd done our stakeholder matrix, we'd done all the things, but actually we hadn't done the work in advance to build trust. And there actually wasn't a great sense of relationship between our team and the cohort that we were seeking to support through a technology change process. So even though we had everything ready to go, we were ready to speed ahead. We wanted to go at high speed because we were ready to go. And because we had a number of other things in the roadmap that we wanted to get to after this piece of work. But we had to go slow because there was low trust. Low trust meant low speed. So that was a lesson for us in looking ahead at our roadmap and doing the things to build relationship, all the basic things that we know to do, to connect with people, to visit them on site where they're at, to understand their work, to have coffees with them, to build relationship, to build trust, to deliver on the small stuff really well so that we're building credibility every day, to respond to the little annoying service requests that come up really well so that we're building credibility, so that we've got that foundation of trust for when the big work needs to get done. And when we've got high trust, we can move at high speed. The next thing is that we actually need to become brilliant storytellers. So we've talked a little bit about the principles of gaining buy-in and implementing technology. And I think with each one, there's a new role that we have to become really good at, a new role that we have to assume. And for this step, create a compelling case, I believe that the role we need to assume and become really, really good at is that we become excellent storytellers. So there are some key questions that we need to be able to answer whenever doing major change, any major transformation, technology projects, any projects actually. So what is the story? What is the story that you can tell about why you are doing this work? We've all heard that big term, start with why. What's the why story that you can tell about this piece of work that you're seeking to implement? What's the problem you're trying to solve? Can you articulate the benefits? And can you articulate the benefits to each stakeholder group? Because they might be different. And it takes time and effort to sit down and really think this through. And it links straight back to our first principle, which was start with people, not technology. Who are the stakeholders? What's their stake in it? What are the benefits that we can articulate for each stakeholder group? What will resonate with each audience? So can you sit down and start to work through, in order to get the buy-in that you need from the stakeholders that you have in your organization, can you start to sit down and think about what is the story that I need to tell? I heard someone tell a story really recently, actually, and I'll pop the next slide up and take you through this. This is just one example, and there's going to be a lot of different ways that you can tell your story according to your stakeholder and what will resonate with the stakeholder that you're seeking to influence. But on the screen, let me talk you through this slide. At the top left, we have got cost of employee training per year. So this story is all about an organisation that was seeking to implement a new learning management system. They were looking at their turnover. They reviewed how many people had left the organisation recently in the last 12 months, and they assessed how many of them left that and didn't complete the induction training and how many left that did complete the induction training. And they found that people were 3.5 times more at risk of early turnover when the training wasn't completed. So the problem they were trying to solve was a turnover problem. And so they used their turnover trend from the last 12 months to forecast what they predicted might be the next 12-month turnover. So they predicted that 86 people would leave their organisation in the forward 12 months. And what they sought to do was implement a new approach to their induction training, their learning management system. So let me take you through the slide. So the cost of employee training per year was $1,115. The number of employees I needed to deliver that to was 166. So the total cost of that program, those two numbers multiplied together, $185,090. Now, the cost per employee turnover, they estimated to be around $10,000 per employee. Don't take that as a benchmark. This is just their story and what made sense in their context. So $10,000 per employee. When they implemented this, so that, like I said, they predicted based on their previous numbers that 86 people would leave in the next 12 months. Actually, 61, they retained 61 of that 86. So if you take what the cost would have been for those 61 people to leave, $10,000, that's a saving of $610,000. So if you take the saving, 610 minus the total cost of the program, $185,000, the net benefit is $424,910. So the return on investment, the cost of the program, 230%. Is that a good story to tell? Of course it is, because they sat down and said, what is the problem you're trying to solve? What are the benefits? And can you articulate the benefits? What will resonate with the audience? And perhaps the audience for this particular story was CFO, because it's very numbers based. So depending on who your audience is, you're going to need to tailor the story. But the point is, can you become a great storyteller? Can you articulate really clearly the problem we're trying to solve? Can you articulate really clearly the benefits of implementing the solution or the process change or the piece of work that you're seeking to implement? And can you do it in a way that resonates with your audience? Now, if it's a service delivery person, perhaps you need to be taking client impact stories to them. So thinking through the audience and tailoring the message to them, but we need to become excellent storytellers. The next principle is to foster inclusion and collaboration. Now, I love this point because it's so important in every context, isn't it? Let me show you. From this book again, Let's Talk Culture, it says 53% of people surveyed said collaboration and teamwork are an essential part of a healthy culture. And our role as leaders is actually to create atmospheres of teamwork and collaboration. This also contributes to our principle of building trust. And when we have high trust, we have high speed. So including people in designing their destiny. So we know that technology projects are a people business. We're seeking to change processes that impact people. We're seeking to influence the behavior of the people in our context. We're seeking to influence the culture of our organizations when we are implementing these pieces of work. So we need to be thinking about building trust, building teamwork, building collaboration. Doing this actually mitigates against one of our biggest risks when we're doing this work, and that is that we don't actually have the whole picture. When we include people, we can actually get a more holistic view of the impact that our work's going to have and the potential or possible alternate solutions that we can be implementing. Let me tell you this story. I was chatting with someone. This is not my analogy. I don't know who to credit it to because I'm not sure who said it originally, but I'm just declaring that it's not mine, but I'm happily passing it on because it's a wonderful metaphor. I was chatting with someone and they said, Cass, I just want you to imagine for a second that we're sitting down next to each other at a cafe, and I pull out of my pocket a set of dice and I put them on the table and I ask you, what do you see? And perhaps your answer would be, I see a 5 and I see a 6. And then I say, well, what I can see, Cass, is a 1 and a 4. Now, who is correct? And the answer, of course, is that both people are correct. What they can see sitting on opposite sides of the dice is valid. It's true, it's accurate, and it's correct. And so this idea of walking around the dice became some language that we've been using within our teams over the last 12 months to walk around the dice and gather multiple perspectives. Because although I can see a 5 and a 6, what's happening for somebody else is actually a 1 and a 4 or a 3 and a 2. And those perspectives are also valid. So when you foster collaboration and inclusion and teamwork, and you get voices in the room that have different perspectives, it actually helps you paint a holistic picture of what's happening, a holistic picture of the problem that you need to articulate, a holistic picture of the benefits that this work will actually create for the people that sit at different parts and angles of the dice. And different solutions. So people might actually be able to bring something different into this conversation than you realize. So walk around the dice, implement that thinking and idea into your organization, include people in the conversation, get stakeholders on board. If you can't answer those questions from the earlier steps that we've talked about who are your stakeholders, what's their stake in this, where are they on the change curve, what is the problem from their perspective, what are the benefits from their perspective. If you don't know the answer to that, collaborate, get them in the room, facilitate conversation, walk around the dice and understand every perspective that's possible about this piece of work so that it enables you to bring your best solution and the best process for implementing the solution to the table. Not only should we facilitate multiple perspectives, but we should seek to bring to the table unusual voices. So I don't know about you, but so often in the organizations that I have worked in the teams that I have worked in, it's very often the same people that get brought to the table. Can anyone else resonate with that? The same people sit around the table, discuss the challenges, come up with the solutions, and as a result of that, we can get into some sort of repetition and pattern of thinking and pattern of delivery. I have on the screen this image, which looks a little bit random for what we're talking about, but it's intended to reflect a story from a book called The Medici Effect by Franz Johansson. And it's a book that's all about innovation, very much worth a read if you are looking for a new book to read over the winter days that we have ahead. And this book, there's one story in this book that actually caught my attention and I have retold again and again because it tells this idea of inclusion and collaboration so beautifully. So the story is at a headline level that there was a hospital in the UK who were having challenges with their process of moving patients from one ward to another ward. Now they were particular wards that I can't remember the details of, but it's probably not important for this particular storytelling moment. And what they could have done with that challenge was go to those same voices that often get drawn on. So what they could have done is gone to the thinkers and decision makers within their own hospital, sat around a table and come up with a solution. They could have done that. They could have gone to another hospital who also have decision makers, experienced people on wards to draw on their thinking and their ideas to come up with a solution for this challenge that they were facing. But instead what they did was they sought to draw on some unusual voices. And so they called up the Formula One Ferrari racing team and asked for their help. Now, if you're thinking about people who are pretty bloody brilliant at processes, Formula One team is not bad, right? So what they did was they documented the processes, they filmed the processes, they sent them away to the F1 team, they reviewed them, they came back, they gave a whole bunch of feedback. And that unusual perspective, that unusual voice and set of experiences that they had in a totally different environment actually helped this hospital solve their challenge. And so the point of that for us is when we're walking around the dais, not only to bring in the usual voices, the usual minds, the usual suspects in your organization, but to stop and think, who would be an unusual voice for us to draw on from this? Who do we not usually hear from? Who doesn't usually get a seat at the table when we're thinking about this particular problem or the solutions that might be relevant for this particular problem, and invite them to the room? The worst thing that could happen is that they say nothing of value. The best thing that could happen is that they bring a wealth of experience and wisdom from their corner of the organization into this space that you're working on that is incredibly valuable. It might also be external people. So stop and think, who are the unusual voices that we can draw on to help us foster inclusion and in collaboration in our work? Don't you love that story? So clever. And then finally, the final principle in gaining buy-in and doing a great job at implementing transformational change when it comes to technology is, of course, celebrate the wins. Now, this image is from 2013. It is the Paris Marathon, and I was fortunate enough to be one of the runners. I don't know if I am in that image or not. If it's like the very back slowest runners, then maybe I'm in it. But if it's not, then I'm just somewhere else off the screen. But it was the most incredible experience. I'm not a runner by any means, but I trained for it and I went on the day and I ran consistently slow the entire 42 point something kilometers. And I crossed the finish line. When I crossed the finish line, it was just the most incredible experience. You have people running up to you saying, "Congratulations, Australia," because you've got your country on your number on your chest and on your back. And they put a medal over you and they give you a shirt and they make a big deal of you, even though I was pretty slow. And I love that image of really celebrating the win, celebrating the completion, celebrating the milestone. And I always laugh telling this story because I really don't need to tell the story about running a marathon to make the point, but why wouldn't I when I've had the moment? But I love the process and the thought of really celebrating the wins, and that there's so much opportunity within this principle for motivating people. Of course, we know this. There's so much research about building morale, the sense of building a sense of team, a sense of achievement within a team, a sense of morale within a team. But it is also actually really closely linked to our pillar of building trust. Because every time we celebrate a win, and if you can be thinking about how can we celebrate wins along the way, that helps us to build credibility with our stakeholders. That helps to bring visibility to the fact that we don't just plan stuff and don't just say we're going to do stuff and then never actually deliver, but we deliver things and we celebrate things. And so often we need other teams and other stakeholders to help us do that. So to bring people together and celebrate each milestone, each team's contribution, to be explicit in naming it, to take the time to stop, whether it's just a cake in your lunchroom or it's a quick Teams call where you tell everyone to bring a coffee or bring a wine and have a moment of being grateful for people's contribution to finishing a piece of work is incredibly powerful, and we can overlook it so often. Because if you've had any experience like I have, we finish something And there's still an incredibly long roadmap of work to continue. And so we're straight on to the next thing, which is excellent. It's full of diligence, it's full of hard work, it's full of wonderful attributes that we want. But also people can get burned out when you're just going, and you don't actually stop to celebrate. So the final thought is to stop and celebrate the wins as much as you can, to build a sense of thanks to the team and to all the teams that have contributed, but to also be building credibility with the organisation about the work that you're doing and getting that credit in the bank, so that when you're off to your next thing, you've got high trust, you've got high credibility, which means you can move at high speed. So I encourage you to do that. And so those are the 5 principles. We want to start with people, not technology. And our new role that we need to assume is to be excellent planners. We need to build trust, and the role that we're playing there is to be excellent relationship builders. We need to be really good at creating a compelling case, and the role we're playing there is to be excellent storytellers. We need to foster inclusion and collaboration, and the role we're playing there is to be excellent facilitators. And we need to celebrate the wins, and the role we're playing there is to be excellent culture builders, which is absolutely foundational to successfully implementing transformational work like we're all engaged in at the moment. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to ask if there are any questions or thoughts or comments, or I know there's so much wisdom in the room as well. So if you have something that you want to share with the group as well, then you're invited to do that as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Cassandra. Yeah, we just have a few starting to come through. Just back from originally when you asked about the technology, there was a few answers about Google Home. A few people just had the Siri on their phone. Somebody said that they remember the sourdough baking trend. They hadn't heard the banana one, but the sourdough one.
I probably would have failed at the sourdough one as well.
Yeah, and Annette was curious to know what ingredient you had missed out, but I think you filled that in when you said refer back to the gaining buy-in. Natasha wanted to know, can you please post the book name? What was the book name?
Yeah, the book. Which book are you referring to? The Medici Effect? Medici Effect by Franz Johansson, which is the one all about innovation, or the one that I had quotes from is actually called Let's Talk Culture by Shane Hatton.
Awesome. Just a few people time. Yeah, if anyone wants to pop in the questions box, do so. Put in yes, it was the Medici Effect. That's what Natasha said. So yes, she said thank you for that. That's exactly what you wanted. Yeah, if anyone has a few questions for Cassandra before we wrap up today, please type it into the box, and I referred back onto her. We can get them answered for you. Also, to remind everyone that this is being recorded. Cassandra's kindly given me the slides already for this, so we will get it into an email later on today for everybody, and I will send you a copy of the recording as well, Cassandra. Yep. And other than that, while we're waiting, I'll just say thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're in the midst of a big move across the seas, so we are very grateful for you taking time out to come and join us today. It was great seeing you. Anyone that doesn't know, Cassandra was at our conference earlier on this year in Melbourne and had great effect, and a lot of people had lots to say about you. So it was great to be able to have you come along here today as well to chat.
Thank you. And it's a great organization. There's so many amazing resources on the Connecting Up website and in the events and the conference if you haven't been before. Like, it's honestly a great space for learning and connecting. I met so many amazing people. So if you haven't already, I mean, you already have because you're online and you're looking at this webinar, but
refer every non-for-profit that they know. Refer a friend. Refer a friend.
It really is great.
All right, we have a few questions here. Sarah, your advice about dealing with those who only see the negatives. I'm not too sure that was there any more to that, Sarah, or is that just your advice about dealing with those who only see the negatives?
Yeah, I mean, we're always, it feels inevitable that we will have stakeholders like this. And so this goes so much to relationship building. and spending time with people to understand what their perspective is. Every change represents a loss, or every change represents some sort of impact, or potentially draws out some sort of fear in people about what they may or may not have to or get to do going forward. So just doing our best to understand where is that actually coming from, and doing the work to build relationship and spend time with people and understand their perspective of the dice, and walk around to their side of the dice and really understand what their perspective and experience is, helps us to tailor not just our communications but our approach to getting them on board. It's definitely possible to get those people on board, and also from time to time you will just have people that have a black hat on and don't want to get on board. But my advice would be spend time, like do the work, even though it's incredibly frustrating. And for me, what happens for me in those situations is, why the heck can't you just see what we're trying to do for the organization and get on board? So that's fine. That's a normal human reaction. But if you do the work and you spend the time with people, even though you feel like it's frustrating and you shouldn't have to do it, it's just part of the gig, and sometimes you have to do it. So do the work, spend the time, and you might find that you can actually bring them along with you because you've spent the time doing relationship building. So that would be my advice.
Natasha, does Cassandra have any tips for top 3 things that may not be so obvious to add to a business case?
Not obvious. Yes, I mean, the obvious things are the things that I kind of talked through. What's the problem? What are the benefits? Very often it comes down to numbers in our sector, because we do have limited resources and we need to be super really good stewards of how we use that. So if we're faced with options and we're trying to create a case for one option, it needs to be compelling. I would say, I mean, I think the things that work are the obvious things. It is the storytelling. Go to the end of the project. Like, don't just talk about the dollars or the efficiencies or the technology solution stuff. Go to the end, like, what does it ultimately do for your clients? What does it ultimately do for your staff, for your volunteers, for the culture, for the morale? That feels a little bit intangible, but people know is incredibly valuable. But honestly, I think the things that work when we're creating compelling cases are the obvious things, and actually just doing the work, like really sitting down and doing the work to think through those key details and then telling them in a way. Probably something I would say actually is, especially for technology leaders, go and do a storytelling course. That sounds a little bit random and left of field, but it actually is a skill that you need to have, and it might give you ways of using language that is more compelling than just the facts, just the black and white detailed facts. So yeah, that would be another piece of advice that I would give to groups doing technology work, is go and do a storytelling course that helps give you language and give you a format and a style for telling the stories and the facts in a way that actually is compelling.
Good advice. I think that is. I don't think anyone else has any questions. As I said, yep, I'll have everything in recording and the slides sent to everyone. Are you okay with anyone contacting you for any advice afterwards if I put your email into the follow-up email, Cassandra?
Please do. LinkedIn's probably the best place. Just Cassandra Hatton. Yeah, would love to be connected, would love to chat about anything that you're working on, and would be very happy to add value if I can. So feel free to reach out.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Cassandra. Have a safe trip across the seas and wish you all the best luck. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.